fighting games have seemingly been around since the dawn of time, and I'm sure there were cavemen way back in the day labbing TAC infinites, but to be honest, I never actually knew what the first couple of fighting games were. I'm deeply familiar with fighting games from the 90s onwards, but I don't know much about the ones that came before it. For this video, let's go way back in time to a period that is now 50 years old. That's right, it's time to grow your hair long, put on some big glasses and start smoking indoors, because we're heading back to the 70s. Video games in general were still in their infancy, and while the first video game ever is believed to be 1958's Tennis for Two, which fun fact was created by a guy who worked on the development of the first nuclear bomb, the first fighting game is believed to be Sega's Heavyweight Champ. This name refers to multiple games in the series, but this video is strictly covering the 1976 original game. What's interesting about this original version, however, is that due to its age, a lot of information regarding the game is either hard or impossible to find, and Wikipedia even lists it as a lost game. Well, I like a challenging game to research for a video, so let's jump right in and learn about Heavyweight Champ, the first ever fighting game. Okay, before we get too ahead of ourselves, let's first establish what exactly a fighting game is. I've used this source before in my videos, and I don't think anyone had a problem with it, so I'm going to use it again here. According to Encyclopedia Britannica, fighting games are based on competitive matches between a player's character and a character controlled by another player or the game. In other words, a fighting game can be strictly defined as a game that focuses on two players fighting each other in a competitive environment. As it's the first video game to feature hand-to-hand combat in a two-player context, I think it's safe to say that Heavyweight Champ is the first ever fighting game. Not much is known about the game's development, and when I say not much, I mean absolutely nothing at all. I couldn't find a single developer interview, quote, or hell, even the names of the people who worked on this game, so it really has fallen into the pits of obscurity. However, I was able to find an old Japanese gaming magazine called Mega Drive Fan, and in the May 1991 issue, it featured a retrospective on some of Sega's earlier work. I've had to translate the text from Japanese into English using Google Translate, and while some sentences have been translated perfectly by the program, others have really weird sentence structure and syntax, so I have taken some creative liberties to make this page readable. When Sega began full-scale development of video games, it naturally had no experience or know-how in game production, so the first step was to turn traditional sports into games. Converting existing sports into games was of great help in exploring the possibilities of video games. This applies not only to Sega, but to all other manufacturers, and it can be said that the game world up until 1975 was a period of exploration for each manufacturer. Ever wondered why Sega and so many other companies back in the day were making so many damn hockey games? Well, you just got your answer. I personally know next to nothing about game development, but Heavyweight Champ doesn't seem like a very complicated game to make. There is no background, there are no special moves or cinematics, and there is no dialogue. The entire game is just these two characters moving left and right in front of a black screen, and they punch each other until one player loses, and there's also a score displayed above each player. Sega had around a decade of experience at this point. Their first game was 1965's Periscope, so adapting popular sports like boxing into arcade games was honestly a pretty simple way to achieve success in the arcade market. Now I can hear you asking, but Carnage, how do you actually play the game? Well, fret not, because I have another quote for you. Rather than using levers or buttons to control the main character, the player grasps and operates a boxing glove-shaped lever attached to the front of the case. By doing so, you can experience the game with movements similar to that of actual boxing. You can move the boxing controller up and down for high and low punches, and it can also be moved inwards for a middle strike. This means that Heavyweight Champ is not only the first fighting game, but it may also be the first motion-controlled game too. It doesn't look like much nowadays, but when Sega put this game out, they were innovating heaps. When it released in October of 1976 in Japan, Heavyweight Champ was a success, and according to a financial report from the now defunct video game trade magazine Game Machine, it was the third highest grossing arcade game of the whole year. That's all I could find regarding the sales figure for this game, literally that was it. But let's move on to something more interesting, shall we? I mentioned before that according to Wikipedia, Heavyweight Champ is considered to be a lost game, meaning that it can no longer be found or emulated. It was also never ported to any home consoles too, so if you really wanted to play this game, you had to go to the arcade. During my research for this video, I came across a website called Lost Media Wiki, and the following passage in their page about the game caught my interest. For a time, there was also no known instance of a surviving cabinet. However, a thread was started on the forums of KLOV, Killer List of Video Games, on February 13th, 2018 looking for information about the game, in which a photo of a cabinet, albeit with a smashed glass bezel, surfaced. This photo supposedly originated from a Yahoo Japan auction page, but no source was given, nor was any info given on the cabinet's functional condition. Though it appears to have suffered some signs of exposure and possible weather damage, and is thus likely not in working order. While the whereabouts of this particular machine is unknown, it does mean that there is potentially at least one cabinet still in existence. This is what the cabinet looks like, and while it's obviously damaged and honestly most likely not working, part of me hopes that it's still salvageable. For all I know, this is probably rotting away in the bottom of a Japanese landfill or something, maybe it's even in the ocean, but who knows really. Heavyweight Champ is essentially nothing more than a digital ghost now, however the game was successful enough to spawn a whole series. A remake with the same name was released in 1987 for Sega's System 16 board, and this game was a success too. The remake is completely different from the original, and it reminds me a lot of the original Punch-Out! Due to Heavyweight Champ being completely lost to the passages of time, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that it's the first instance of lost media in video games. I mean, you obviously can't download the game and run it on a PC emulator at 4K with your brand new fight stick, and it's not like you can play the game on real hardware via an actual cabinet too. I really think it's a shame that the first fighting game is lost media, never to be played again by anyone. Video game preservation is something that I think is very important because it allows all of us to easily access older games on modern hardware. So I'm really bummed out that the original Heavyweight Champ has been completely lost to time. The idea of punching a monochrome character with a motion-controlled boxing glove created using technology from the 70s sounds wild, and I really would have loved to give this game a go somehow. If you've ever played any of the games in the series, leave a comment and let me know your thoughts. Thanks for watching, and I hope you enjoyed it.